Good morning, and welcome to St. Paul, United Church of Christ, Keokuk.
You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways before a word is on my tongue. You, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain.
Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar, the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.'" Jesus heals on the Sabbath. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and, deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus.
Would the children come forward for the children's sermon? That's right, nice and speedy. Mm-hmm.
I am the best.
You are the best, yeah. Yeah.
I am the best.
Very good. Yes. You want to say that in the microphone there? Say that microphone there. I am the best. Very good. Oh, here we have a few more. Yeah, and some more, and some more. Okay, widen out here so that I can sit down. Yeah. Okay. Widen out a little bit more so that I can, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to come over here. This is like herding cats, as they say. Well, I had some problems last night. Do you know what happened? My dog, who is supposed to obey me,
And the dog just appeared.
Yes, I had a little light in the backyard, one of those, you know, that is a solar light, and it's stuck in the ground. Well, the dog got hold of the top of that light and started running around the yard and would not come to me. So here you have a light running all over the yard, and the dog will not come to me, and this light is in its mouth. Now, I'm supposed to be Lord over that dog, but I could tell that it didn't think so. It wanted that light. So you had the most ridiculous look with this dog running with a mouthful of light all over the yard. Yeah. So finally I had to scold the dog, and I had to say, "Look, I'm the alpha dog here. I'm the one who leads. You are the one who follows. Give me that light." When I finally got a hold of her. Now, we're kind of like that sometimes with God, too. God is the Lord over all things, and sometimes we want to go our own way. Do you ever have that where you want to go your own way?
Yes.
Yes, you do. And your parents sometimes have to help you to understand where you're supposed to go, right? Okay, so God sometimes has to help us to understand where we're supposed to go too. So, what do we say today? Can we say it together on 3?
Yes.
God is Lord over all. 1, 2, 3. God is Lord over all. Can we say it with a congregation too?
Yes.
1, 2, 3. God is Lord over all. Okay, let's pray together. Lord,
Lord,
help us
help us
to understand
to understand
that you are Lord
when you are Lord
over all.
over all.
Amen.
Amen.
Very good. Thank you. My mother told me when I was born that I was a big baby. Jen still thinks that I'm a big baby. But she meant size. She meant size, and I was about 12 pounds. I know. I hear ow out there. That makes sense to me. So big that when I actually was finally born, I'd be big enough almost to say, who's in charge here? So who is in charge? And I talked to the kids about this. Who is in charge? Well, it turns out that God is in charge of things, but we sometimes want to be in charge. And we also want to sometimes even hold God to account. Now, that was true, for example, with Job, because he was a very righteous man. And because he was righteous, he thought to himself, well, God is going to take care of me. But then the devil, when he was going to and fro across the earth, one time came to God and said, the only reason why Job worships you is because you've built a fence around him. Nothing bad can happen to him. Well, God said, Job would worship me anyway. The devil said, I don't think so. So what happened? God allowed for Job to suffer. And Job remained faithful, you see. Job remained faithful through all that suffering, even though there were people who had told him to curse God and die because of all his suffering. But you see, Job was holding God to account. Nothing can hurt me because I am a righteous man. And Job was holding God to account in that way. And sometimes we want to do that too. We want to hold God to account rather than depending on God to sustain us through whatever may happen. We want to say, well, I deserve this, God, because I did this. You see, I deserve this because I did this. It's like putting a quarter into the machine. Well, no, it's not a quarter anymore. A couple of bucks in the machine and getting out a Coke. You see, it's the vending machine God, where we say, God, I'm going to hold you to account. Well, the Pharisees, the religious leaders of Jesus' day, tried to do that too. They felt that they were in charge, and they wanted to know then by what authority Jesus was authorized to do the things that Jesus did. They really didn't want to think that Jesus had the power and authority of God. They wanted to know whether or not his authority was legitimate, and they would approve whether or not it was legitimate. They wouldn't necessarily look on it on its own basis. They wanted to give approval. And we see that where one day Jesus was teaching in the temple, in the courts, and proclaiming the good news. And the chief priests and the teachers of the law, together with the elders, came to him and said, tell us by what authority you are doing these things. They said, who gave you this authority? He replied, I will ask you a question. Tell me, John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? They discussed it among themselves, the Bible says, and said, if we say from heaven, he will say, why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, all the people will come and stone us because they are persuaded that John was a prophet. So they answered, we don't know where it was from. Jesus said, neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things. You see, the scribes and the Pharisees did not have an honest inquiry. They wanted to be in charge and they wanted to have the power. And in what Jesus was doing, he was challenging that power. And so they wanted to hold him to account. They wanted to find by what authority he was doing the things that he did. They knew, didn't they? They really knew that the authority that they were confronting was from God. And they feared it. Why did they fear it? Because they were unwilling to give up their own power and authority. They were like that dog last night, running around with a light in its mouth, fully lit, and not wanting to come to me because it was enjoying what it was doing, you see? So, essentially, they just wanted to keep what power and authority they had. Power is very seductive that way. They say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And sometimes, when we hold God to account, we are fearful that we are going to lose control. All of us know controlling people. Maybe some of us are controlling people. It's difficult to lose control. It's difficult to give over control. And Jesus was clearly in charge when he came before the authorities. And they challenged that authority, but he always came back with some kind of question they couldn't answer, and they were fearful of the people. They were also fearful of Jesus because they were fearing that they were going to lose the authority that they had. If Jesus is in charge, then we go to Jesus for our needs. That's something the religious authorities also feared because they liked the attention of the people. They liked the people to feel that they had to go to them for their needs, and now Jesus was there, and maybe they wouldn't feel that way anymore, you see. Maybe they wouldn't feel as needed. And so we go to Jesus for our needs. Jesus' followers went to Jesus for their needs, and those needs were fulfilled. So in these days, we can give up authority. We can give up our own sense of wanting to be in control of all sorts of things too. All of us have it a little bit, and we can go to Jesus and allow Jesus to be in control. That's where we turn our will and our lives over to Jesus. See, again, I'll go back to the days in which I was counseling alcoholics and addicts. One of the steps that they would follow in AA was to turn their will and their life over to a power higher than themselves. We all have a bit of self-will. Addiction and alcoholism was referred to as self-will run riot. You see? And what they needed to do basically was to give up that part of themselves which always wanted to be in control. Like I say, we all have some of it. Quite often we find it taking us over, and we need to be reminded that Jesus is in charge, that our needs will be met if we go to Jesus for our needs. We'll be frustrated if we just go to ourselves for our needs. We say to ourselves, we put our fingers under our lapels and we say, well, I can supply all my own needs. I don't really need anybody. I'm all grown up. Well, in fact, before God, we're not all grown up. What I used to say in group with the addicts was, people I was counseling was, well, you're all grown up. So, what's happened? Self-will run riot. Now, you're all grown up, but you're in jail because you drove drunk or you had possession of a substance you weren't supposed to have. But I'm all grown up. I can do whatever I want, you see. Now you have a mommy or a daddy who tells you what to do. You have to go to your PO. But I'm all grown up. I can do whatever I want to do. You see, when you looked at addiction, there was the feeling you had the freedom to do whatever you wanted to do. But in fact, we are all children before God. We are all children before God. And that's the freedom that we have. The freedom is that we can let self-will go, and we can go to Jesus for every need that we have. We can have the freedom that children have. Remember when you were really young and you wanted to be all grown up? Yeah, you remember that, right? Because you're there, right? Yeah. Well, you wouldn't have anybody tell you to go to bed on time, would you? No. You wouldn't have anybody to tell you to eat your broccoli, right? No. You could do whatever you want to do, right? Well, then you get to be an adult and you find out you have to pay for insurance on your car. You have to pay for the gas. You have your own little kids to take care of. And you have all sorts of responsibilities. Well, I'll tell you, some of the adults wish that they could go back to being children, to go back to your age. And we can when we go to Jesus Christ. Because all of the burdens that we carry, all of the things that we have as responsibilities as adults are carried a whole lot easier if we give control to Jesus Christ. If we say in times that are challenging, of which there are many, Jesus, you are in charge. Now, the leaders of the church, of course, did not want to go back to being children before God. And so they would watch Jesus and they would find fault. We have another story in the Bible. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some of the heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" Why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for the priest to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." And so you see, Jesus is again asserting his authority, and this made the religious leaders uncomfortable. It would appear that Jesus was making changes. It would appear that Jesus was speaking of his own authority on a par with God. You see, the religious leaders always wanted to retain control, always wanted to keep him under their thumb. And it became very difficult to do. It's like keeping hundreds of beach balls down in a swimming pool. You can't do it. You can't really do it. You can put one down, then another one pops up, and that's the way it was with Jesus for them. They were losing control. They had to become children again. They had to be reborn. They had to be like Nicodemus. They had to see everything in a new way. And it was hard for them to do that. as it's hard for us, but there's great freedom in it because we can once again be children. We're not responsible for everything in the world. We're not alone on our responsibility. God is there helping us. Jesus is fulfilling our needs. We're not alone. But the leaders of the people felt that they needed to assert that authority. They had to keep that control. And that's what finally led to the cross. That's what finally led to the cross. And there they completely lost control because they thought, well, okay, he's dead now. We don't have to worry about it. And then the resurrection came. We're always like children before Jesus. We're always like children before God. We're always like children. We need guidance, and we can bring our needs to God, and we can feel confident under the care of God. You see, Peter was a very impulsive individual, but he began to recognize that they would have to take the control away from the religious leaders and assert that Jesus had control. Listen to what we read in the Bible. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he said to his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." At that point, he gave his will and his life over to Jesus. Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." We're always like children before Jesus, before God. And we have to say, you are the leader. You are the leader. You are in control, God. We are like Peter in that sense. We need to bring our needs before Jesus Christ. And then there's something else that happens. Something we all want. We become part of a loving family. We become part of the family of God. And when we're part of that family, we know that our parent is God, and that under God's leadership, we will live together in love and harmony. Everyone is seeking a loving family. There are many people in this world who are seeking a loving family. I come across many people who say, "Well, I have all of these troubles in my life. What can I do?" What do I say? Go to church. You'll find a loving family there in the followers of Jesus Christ. And their face remains troubled because they don't want to give it up. They don't want to give up their own self-will. Their self-will has led them down the line of possibly drugs, possibly alcohol, possibly broken relationships, a continual frustration in their lives. Or maybe just a feeling of, is this all there is? Is this all there is? Do we just live and then we die? But you see, when we become a part of a loving family, and we have Jesus as the head of the family, and God has the head of the family, then everything's different. Life becomes worth living. Life is different because of that loving family which is around us, which we can count on. Some of the people I talk to are from broken families or families full of all kinds of conflict. Some of them have been rejected by their families. I say, well, you can find another loving family in the church. Come to church and find a family of choice in which God is Father and Jesus is Father and also fills the role of mother in many ways. This family is motivated by love. And when we follow the authority of Jesus out of love and gratitude, all of a sudden the family surrounds us. And when the family surrounds us, we know that we are home and that we can let go and let God. Amen.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
You have been listening to St. Paul United Church of Christ, 2030 Plank Road, Keokuk. Join our worship service at 10 a.m. with fellowship hour immediately following. Until next week, may God bless.